Hello, friends and lovers, it's Haelian, and today we're going to go over the Arcana cards. Just kind of discuss each card one by one, talk about which ones you should have on more often, which ones you probably shouldn't bother with. Also discuss full loadouts here, and if you just want to know what's a good loadout to have for the majority of your runs, honestly, this one I have on screen here is probably what I use 80-ish% of the time with just some small tweaks here and there, but we'll kind of get into that. But first, let's talk about the cards one by one. Also, sorry if I look a little worn out or something today. I just woke up after streaming the game for 11 hours straight. Alright, let's just get started. We're just going to do one card at a time for now. We'll discuss the loadouts later, okay? So the Sorceress, your Omega moves are 30% faster. You should have it on probably 95% of the time. Even if you don't plan to use Omega moves in your next run, you might want it on just to activate this whole column here, assuming you have the full thing, the full Arcana here, right? That way you can activate Divinity. Any boons you find have 15% chance to include Blessings, because you need to activate a whole row or a whole column in order for Divinity to be on. But yeah, incredibly strong for just one grasp. Next up is Wayward Son. After you exit a location, restore 5 health. Now, this one you should probably have on, especially if you're new. If you're new, 100% of the time for one grasp. Once you get into the late game, you might want to be turning it off for some things. You'll see like a loadout here where we have to exchange some stuff to get the levers to turn on. And usually Wayward Son is the one that goes away. Eventually, you do find ways to kind of heal outside of this, and it's not super necessary, but this is a really good card for when you're new to the game and you just want to sustain and kind of just learn the enemies, learn the game, learn the biomes and things like that. It's really good early on, so you should have it on all the time at the start, and then later on, I started turning it off like 50-ish% of the time. The Huntress, while you have less than 100% magic, your attack and special deal plus 50% damage. Couple things. Priming magic does not mean that you're under 100% magic. That is just your new max magic, I guess you can say. So priming magic does not work for this, in other words. Also, remember, this is only your attack and special damage, so it won't help things like Splash, Blitz, or Scorch, even if you have them on your attack or special. It's just going to be what we would call the white damage from the weapon itself. I have this on probably 70% of the time. It's quite good for 2 grasp, but you do need to remember to basically use it sometimes. So if you're using your attack and special a lot, but you're not using Omegas a lot, it's a good idea to try to sneak one in just to spend a little bit of magic at the start of each room or something like that, you know what I mean? But 50% damage is kind of a lot on those, you know, when you think about it, that's half an Aphrodite boon. So yeah, I would have it on a lot of the time. Eternity, while you channel your Omega moves, everything moves slower for 1.2 seconds. Nah. It's just not that good. It sounds good, and I've tried to get back into it, but I kind of just can't have the fun with it, is the best way I can describe it. It doesn't really feel like it helps. There was an instance in early access where there was a different iteration of this card, and it was much better. It's just not anymore. I think the slowdown is less if you experience the early access version, and it's for shorter time, kind of. And it also kind of scales with how long it takes for you to channel your Omega move. It kind of just makes the game feel a little weird, too, honestly. I don't really think it's worth 3 grasp, and I don't really think you should be using it very much, whether you're new or not, honestly. It's not the worst card that we're going to have out here, I'd say, though, but it's worth experimenting with is what I would say, but I use it, like, less than 10% of the time. Usually, if I am doing it, it's just to kind of check it out one more time to see if it's any better than I remember. The Moon, your Hex also charges up automatically as though you used 3 magic every 1 second. Activate any surrounding card. You just don't really want to think about this one, you know? If you're in the late game, you have a lot of unlocks, and you just want to do a fun Hex run, then you want this on, right? Just to have it on so you can use your Hex more often. But otherwise, I wouldn't go out of my way to activate this card, really. If you're just trying to get your wins in early on, there's no reason to go for this card. I wouldn't even bother unlocking it until like crazy late, honestly. It's probably just quite expensive to upgrade and everything like that. It's not worth going out of your way for. So while it is on sometimes when I have an Arcana setup, I would say I go out of my way for it less than 5% of the time. So there's that. Row number 2, I'm going to activate the cards for like the ones I'd kind of recommend as we go here. And probably in the order that I would kind of recommend them too. Because I know you only start out with these 4 when you have a new save file, and you got to expand down this way, so I'll definitely show you what's going on there, basically. The Furies, you deal 30% more damage to foes in your cast. Really good. Great for 2 grasp. It's just always have it on 100% of the time. I can't think of a reason that you'd actually want to have this off. This is probably one of few that is 100% always on, I think. Persistence, you have plus 40 health and plus 40 magic. Really good. It should be on 95% of the time, but I have had a very set few instances where I turned it off. I think it was mostly for speedrunning, though, which isn't going to apply to most people. It's just very, very good for the cost, I think, here. 2 grasp for that amount is just really, really strong. The Messenger, your cast momentarily make you impervious and move 70% faster. This one, I won't lie, I could use some more experimentation with it. It actually kind of feels a little bit like another dash, to be quite honest, because the imperviousness and the move faster, yeah, it feels a little bit like a dash when you drop your cast. It's not bad for 1 grasp, but I'll admit I have a hard time finding space for it when I'm heading out. Like, what am I turning off for this? Because all my other options just feel like a higher priority, so it's quite rare that I actually find a way to fit this in other words. I would say you're not wrong for turning it on, but I'm not certain what you would turn off is what I would say. So maybe don't prioritize it, basically. The Unseen, you restore 10 magic every 1 second. This one is kind of, what's the term? Divisive, I guess I would say. I think this one is a bit of a trap. I can understand why you might want it when you're new to the game and you don't have, say, rerolls and things like that, and it's hard to control what boons you see or what boons you get. Maybe you don't have a lot of keepsakes either. But this thing is really bad for the cost. It's 5 grass, 10 magic a second. It's a decent amount. But remember, anytime that a boon says you restore magic every X amount of seconds or whatever, you will not get that magic while you are channeling Omegas. So if you're doing a build where you're spamming Omegas a lot, you're only restoring magic less than half the time probably, you know? So that's pretty bad, unfortunately. And then there's like a little delay before you start restoring again after that. And it's just 5 grasp. It's just way too much grasp. This could be 100 magic per second, but if it still costs 5 grasp, I wouldn't recommend it because you can solve this Arcana card with 1 magic regen boon, possibly without any pomps, possibly without even worrying about the rarity either. So it's definitely not worth it, but I can understand if you're still fleshing out the cards, why you might grab it and just use it because maybe you have more grasp than you need and you don't have all the cards available to you. But otherwise, 0% of the time, do not use that card. The Knight, you have a plus 15% chance to deal critical damage with each move in an Omega combo. This one might be a little confusing. So it just means they want you to use different Omega moves back to back. So Omega attack, then Omega special, then Omega attack, then Omega special, and each one will get a 15% crit chance, basically. This is actually really strong if you have a build that vibes with it. I think one of the best instances is Aspect of Momus for the staff, where you're incentivized to go through all the different Omega moves, basically, and just drop them all down. Works fantastic for that. Something like Aspect of Shiva is actually really good for it, too, because you can drop an Omega special, build up the stacks of destruction, and then you can unleash a big Omega attack as well. So it is good, and I use this one a bit more often, but it depends on the aspect, basically. I have to know ahead of time that I'm going to be going back and forth between at least 2 different Omega moves in order to want to turn it on. But if I was going to turn it on, I'm usually turning off the Huntress for that. And again, the Moon usually doesn't matter that much to me. Row number 3, the Swift Runner. Your sprint is 10% faster unless you pass through most foes in your way. So this one is actually kind of not necessary. Like it's kind of not worth the 1 grasp that it costs, I'll admit. However, the main reason I probably have it on like over 90% of the time is because of Divinity. Yeah, because you have to activate all cards in a row or column, and oftentimes the row or column I'm activating, it's either the first column or the 3rd row. So it's Swift Runner is there for both of them, so Swift Runner is on for probably 90% of my runs, you know what I mean? So while it's not worth it early on in a save file until you have like Divinity, once you get there, you probably have to have it on, sadly. It's more of a have to have than want to have, you know? All right, Death. You have plus 3 Death Defiances. So obviously, when you're new to the game, you don't have a lot of cards. You're going to have Death on for 4 grass. As soon as you get to it, you should have it on 100% of the time. But once you eventually get down here to Strength and you're able to upgrade Strength, as well, I should say, I would recommend swapping over to it. Maybe not as soon as you can, but relatively soon. They're quite comparable, is the truth. They're very close to one another. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about when you would want one over the other later on. I think once we get to Strength, probably. For Death Defiances, you're stuck with them when you're new to the game. And then if you ever start exploring, like, say, 40 plus heat, you might want to consider using Death Defiances again. mostly because of interactions with Athena and ways to get Death Defiances back. It's just, turns out there's a lot of ways to get Death Defiances back in this game, basically. And so you might want to abuse that and allow yourself to whittle down your Death Defiances throughout a run, gain them all back, and then hopefully you just have enough to beat the final boss, you know what I mean? But in the meantime, yeah, you should always have it on when you're new, though. Like, there's no reason to ever really turn it off, and I hope that's plain to see, basically. The Centaur, you gain +5 health, +5 magic whenever you pass through 5 locations. I find that this just is on naturally, like, all the time, and I don't ever have to actually think about it, because I tend to just want the cards that get it activated. I don't necessarily think it's worth thinking about and going out of your way for to activate it if you're fooling around with the cards, is what I would say. If you're trying to just unlock stuff, just think about which cards you have available and which ones you plan to have on during a run and whether or not it's worth the unlock cost at that point, basically, is all I would say. But yeah, I mean, it's on like 100% of the time for me, I think. Origination, you deal 50% more damage to foes with at least 2 curses from different Olympians, 100% of the time. Always have Origination on. If you're new, you should prioritize getting to Origination as soon as possible. This is plus 50% to all of your damage. Like we talked about the Huntress, right? That's only attack and special damage. The Origination is all damage. Counts Blitz, Splash, Omegas, Cast, everything. It's just really important to every run, just like how Privilege Status was really important in Hades 1. Origination is incredibly important. Then all your runs have to kind of revolve around getting curses. You need to get Origination, worth 5 grass, 100% of the time. The Lovers, you take 0 damage the first 3 times you are hit in Guardian encounters. I use this when I use it for A, speed runs, and B, maybe high fear runs where I don't get as much healing from, say, Wayward Son. Or maybe I just maybe even without the healing thing, honestly. Besides that, I don't generally use it for a fun run or something. One thing to keep in mind, a boon-like security system from Hephaestus. It gives you armor at the start of a room for 7 seconds temporarily. Lovers will fall off before the enemies start hitting your armor. So a boon like that is kind of wasted if you have the Lovers on. That doesn't really make the Lovers worse, it kind of makes the security system worse, to be clear. But it is something to consider, because, in other words, you could get a makeshift Lovers in a run by getting a boon-like security system from Hephaestus, is I guess what I'm trying to say. But I use this a decent amount of time, maybe like 30% of the time. But for a fun run style, I guess I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. The Enchantress, you have +3 rerolls and can alter location rewards. I mean, this is interesting, because if you're relatively new to the game, you probably don't know what you want to pick often, right? You're kind of just basing it off of vibes and like, oh, hey, a shiny epic boon. And that makes sense. That's how I play new games too, you know? It definitely makes sense. So this is kind of a low priority until you get to know the game and you get to know what you want or what you're looking for a little bit more, to be honest. But once you kind of get into the flow, you're probably just going to always have this on. Partially, I mean, not just partially because of the actual effect, but also because of the Fates, which requires you to activate all of the surrounding cards as well. Once you get the full Arcana card loadout, I think you just want it on 100% of the time. I never turn it off. I never turn it off personally. But this wouldn't be the next card I would unlock if I was, say, down here at this point. I would probably go to the next card here first, the Boatman. You have plus 300 Didgery dollars for fine grass. It is expensive. It is very expensive. When you think about it, that's 2 boons, and 2 boons usually at the startish of your run, you know, in the first biome or so. That's kind of a lot. Getting that big boost early on, it just feels really good to keep like the flow and the pace up, and you can kind of keep things moving. You know, it's weirdly better than it sounds, is what I would say. Admittedly, the cost is high, and there's been times where I turn it off, but I probably have it on 95% of the time nowadays. I used to fool around a bit more with it off, but not so much anymore. The Artificer. You have 3 chances this night to turn any minor find into a random find. It does explain minor finds and major finds over there. Did I say, what did I call it? Major find. It does explain them over there, but just to be clear, like, you have to hit a button on your controller or keyboard to actually transform it, and you got to remember to do it, which is oftentimes my downfall. So it's just very random. It's kind of fun just to see, like, wow, I got something super cool, because you can get things like hammers from this, honestly. You can't necessarily get additional hammers, is how I would describe it, though. Like, if you already have a hammer in the first zone on your person, you won't get another one until you're at least in the third zone via Artificer. But if you don't already have a hammer, there's a chance it'll score you one. But you could also get max magic, you could also get a palm, you could also get max health. There's a large pool of rewards for major rewards there. And I wouldn't recommend transforming Nectar, even though it's one of the options, because Nectar is a free palm, at least once you have all the unlocks out there, right? I use it for fun 15% of the time, you know? 15% of the time, maybe. And once again, I'm probably turning off these two or something like that in order to turn it on. And usually it's more for like a meme run where I want to see how many palms I can get on this one particular boon or something like that. Admittedly, I think it does have a sort of a place, namely in Underworld runs, and maybe you're running Vow of Forfeit, which denies you your first boon. Artificer might kind of save you, but it only might. You know, there's no guarantee for it, sadly. Excellence. Any boons you find have plus 50% chance to include legendary or at least rare blessings. I just don't think it's worth 5 grasp, you know? I mean, the thing is, it comes back down to what are you turning off for this? And I guess if I had to do a run with excellence, I'd have to turn off Boatman, I can imagine. Maybe if I'm going to the surface and I'm specifically saying, okay, I want to get Apollo's legendary boon before I even leave the first zone on the surface. You can actually spend rolls to make this happen relatively reliably, and then you could have excellence on to kind of increase those odds once you have all the prerequisites, but I don't know. I don't know if it's really worth it still, honestly. I never use this card. Never, ever, ever. Even after they had buffed it, I don't use it. The Queen. Any boons you find have plus 10% chance to include duo blessings. So you need to activate no more than 2 cards that use the same amount of grasp. So we have 3 1-cost cards on here. So you would have to turn off something from here. So that's where turning on something like the Lovers can benefit you slightly. This is only on for me about the same amount of times that the Lovers is on, personally. I don't think it's really worth going out of your way for just that 10% chance. I think the chance is actually quite low. But this is one of the interesting ones where you can kind of think about it and play with the cards a little bit more, I do think. But I don't usually think it's worth going out of your way for, you know, especially if you have all the rerolls. It's not really worth it because you can usually just use the rerolls to get the things that you want for the most part. The Fates, you have plus 4 rerolls to activate all surrounding cards. Not much to say about it. It should pretty much always be on for the most part there. And on to the next one, the Champions. You have plus 3 rerolls. You can alter boons and certain other choices. Now that I read that, I wonder what they mean by that, actually, because I'm not really sure. Oh, they might mean the Wells of Charon in the Underworld, honestly. So, I mean, I'm thinking back to Hades 1 a bit more here, and this is technically a more powerful effect than the Enchantress for location rewards, I do think. So if somehow you're still just picking between one or the other, I would choose the Champions first, definitely. I mean, re-rolling boons is just incredibly important in order to get a precise build going on, and you should definitely be doing that 100% of the time. I have this card on 100% of the time, never turn it off. Strength, here we go. While you have no death defiances, you take 40% less damage and deal 20% more. So, this is our loadout, basically, that I recommended at the start here, and we'll go over some other potential loadouts, too. Let's talk about strength, and it's probably going to take a little bit of time here. So let me get this out there right away. You do not need to be very good at the game in order to use strength over death defiances. Do not let the game convince you of that. I can understand from reading the description why it might look like the kind of card that you would use if you're already really good at the game and, you know, you get easy wins left and right. And then, therefore, you know, you can use this over death defiances because you don't need that extra defense. Strength has a strong defense here. Negative 40% damage is a lot. It makes healing way more effective, like the healing that you could find. So if you have Wayward Sun on, you know, that's much more effective is one way to look at it. And plus 20% global damage again. So global means it hits everything. Attacks, specials, blitz, splash, scorch, all that stuff. It hits all those things. It's just a lot. I think you're going to feel a lot more comfortable with strength if you start trying it out. That's usually the feedback I get from people is that, oh, I only use death defiances because I thought, you know, I was bad at the game, or that I thought that I had to have them for that extra defense, but then I tried strength and it was so much easier. That's the feedback I usually get when I do convince people to use strength. So just keep that in mind. At the very least, if you haven't tried it, you really should for a few runs. And I think you will actually feel quite a difference. It feels better is how I would describe it. you don't need Death Defiances. I know the mentality is there. I was kind of awestruck too when I had no Death Defiances running around like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. But you get used to it and it's going to feel way, way better. I do promise you. Again, they are comparable, so it's close nowadays. There was a bigger gap between the two cards at one point in early access, but now they are very close. So if you just are really dead set on running Death Defiances, that's fine. It's not that big of a deal, honestly. So if you're going to do a loadout with Death Defiances, you could just do something like this. You could actually turn off Swift Runner this way, which gives you one more grasp, and then you could maybe turn on the Messenger, maybe if you wanted. You could then turn off the Huntress, and then you could turn on the Lovers, maybe, if you don't think you're going to be using like a lot of regular attack or special cards there. Okay, I got carried away. But let's go back and finish off the individual cards here. Divinity, any boons you find have plus 15% chance to include epic blessings. Activate all 5 cards in any other row or column. So, this one's interesting because I go out of my way to activate it in actuality, I've noticed. You know, quite a bit, because usually it costs me like 1 grasp to activate it. It's usually the difference of Swift Runner or not, you know what I mean? So I look at this card as a 1 grasp cost card, and I feel like it's worth it. When you think about that compared to, say, Excellence, it's quite a big difference, really, right? It's quite a big difference between that. And even the Queen, it's kind of a 3 grasp card, although this one's a bit harder to kind of give a value to. But that's sort of how it feels to me, is that you kind of have to take some really big changes for that. Whereas Divinity, I'm only kind of wasting, so to speak, 1 grasp on something like Swift Runner. So I feel like it's worth it because of that. So I have it on 95% of the time. All right, the last card here. This one is just for fun. Let's be honest. Judgment. You activate 5 random inactive Arcana cards whenever you vanquish a Guardian, but you need to activate no more than 3 cards. So if you want to do a Judgment run, I think one of the big ones that people sometimes do is just do the rerolls in the Boatman. You could even skip Boatman and probably put on like Strength, or if you really wanted Death Defiances instead as your 3 cards. It kind of depends how comfortable you are with getting through. The only thing I will say about Judgment is that it's a bit of a gimmick, and I don't think it's a good strategy for just beating the game or winning. You know what I mean? I don't think it's gonna, net you a win that you couldn't get otherwise at your particular aspect or fear or anything like that. But it's fun. I'll give it that. It's a fun gimmick to have in the game, I do think. I think my main argument against using it very often, again, particularly as like a strategy or something here, is that there's not a lot of cards when I look at my average loadout here that it's like, I really wish I had that card active right now. Like, I'm okay with not having Artificer. I don't want Death Defiances if I have Strength on, basically. Don't really care about Excellence or the Queen. Lovers would be nice, I'll say that. The Knight is super dependent. Don't care about the Unseen. Don't care about Eternity. Don't care about the Moon. And Messenger would be nice, but it's a 1 grasp card, and it's kind of just not that big of a deal. So in other words, do I want to activate a bunch of cards that I don't really care about, probably throughout the entirety of the run, but not even necessarily at the end of the run, possibly early on in the run when I really don't want them? Or do I just want to have 95% of the cards that I already want? There you go. I hope that explains it. Okay, next, let's quickly go over how you should probably handle things if you're new to the game, you just booted up, and you just open up your Arcana cards, and you kind of need to know the order of events here. Honestly, I would kind of go in the order that they give you for the most part. I mean, you have to do the Sorceress first, and then I would probably jump into Wayward Sun right after that. Then I would take the Furies, then I would take Persistence, then I would jump straight down to Death Defiances after that, and that's 10 Grasp right there, which is your starting Grasp, so you're going to need to up your Grasp in order to activate anything else. Once you get 12 Grasp, which is just 1 upgrade, you can grab the Huntress real quick, and then after that, I would make my way to Origination, which means you would have to unlock the Centaur next. Even though you can't actually use it, it's going to be worth it, because Origination is a huge damage boost, and it's going to feel like night and day. Now, the only issue is it costs 5 Grasp, right? So let's say you've managed to upgrade your Grasp to 14. You could probably do something like this, maybe? So that's 14 Grasp right there, basically. Yeah, you're turning off the Sorceress, but what can you do? You might just be spamming your attacker special a lot instead of using a lot of Omegas at that time. In fact, yeah, if you don't have the Sorceress on, I probably wouldn't recommend touching Omegas for the most part. But then eventually, you'll get to upgrade your Grasp more, and you can take that back, you know what I mean? After you have Origination, where would I recommend that you go exactly from there? I mean, it's kind of a good question, and at that point, I might say it's mostly up to you. I think getting down into the boatman and then the rerolls is probably really nice, though. You know, you could also just think about grabbing the lovers right away after origination. That way you get to activate the centaur right then and there. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, that's the 5th row, so I think you don't get that right away. So yeah, I guess you could go down this way. You know, I don't know if I'd recommend getting Artificer early on, but yeah, it does get very expensive eventually. But yeah, that's 18 grass. So this is like a decent starting loadout there. Again, I would recommend swapping to strength when you get the opportunity. I don't know if you have to expedite it, but once you kind of get into a comfortable spot in the game and you have most of the cards upgraded, I think it's a good idea. So here's a loadout I use if I'm doing like 50 fear, honestly, and I have Vow of Scars on a lot to reduce healing, because then Wayward Son is a lot less effective, right? I am using the Death Defiances, and then I'm probably going to abuse Athena's Keepsake to get those Death Defiances back in a place like the Morning Fields or the 3rd biome in general, maybe the 4th if I haven't lost too many or something like that. Because Athena has a boon that will give you all your Death Defiances back, but you have to have 0 in order to actually use her Keepsake. So that's where Death Defiances actually come in to be very, very strong, honestly. So like the Lovers feels pretty good to block boss hits anyway, when you have, you know, a large amount of damage coming in from them potentially. But I still wouldn't sacrifice things like the rerolls. The Boatman is kind of interesting as a potential turnoff here, but it's kind of like, what would I turn on otherwise? And I guess I'm not really sure I care, you know? So I usually just wind up with it on. I have experimented with things like Artificer, and it's not a terrible choice, I do think, for something like this. But yeah, I'm pretty comfortable for this for a high fear prospect. Really, the only other fear loadout I think I use that is any different from anything we discussed is having the Knight on, you know, again, for very specific aspects. We kind of already went over it, which ones we would do it for, but yeah, I wouldn't change any other cards otherwise. So sometimes I'm just kind of deciding between, do I have the Huntress on and I'm not using a lot of Omegas, or am I turning the Knight on and I am using a lot of Omegas? And that's sort of the question I have for the run I'm about to do. And it depends on the aspect, it depends on the boons I plan to get, and lots of other things, because usually I'm experimenting with at least one thing, you know what I mean? So it's never a complete certainty. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the best loadouts, I guess you could say. All right, I think that's it for my Arcana guide. I hope I was at least a little bit helpful for y'all, but if you got any questions, make sure you let me know down in the comments, and I'll try to reply to them best I can. If you got other, like, loadout tips, I guess you could say, feel free to share with us and the others. And by the way, if you got videos that you're interested in seeing from me, make sure you let me know, because I'm trying to decide how to prioritize which videos y'all are looking for. But I do appreciate you. Like, comment, subscribe. You know what the hell we asked for. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in another video.